Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of my Witcher history. As the Netflix show is almost upon us, and actually today on Wednesday the 18th there is the official premiere here in Poland, I've decided to make some videos about the origins of The Witcher in its written form. In the last video I showed you the first Polish editions of the short stories, and today we'll get to the first editions of The Witcher books. And you can find the links to my previous videos on The Witcher history below in the description. By the way, if you find this video interesting, please leave a comment or maybe give a thumbs up or maybe even consider subscribing, even though most of the stuff I produce is in Polish, including my weekly gaming podcast, but actually this might be a good incentive to learn a beautiful language. And a word of warning, if you don't know the saga there might be some very light spoilers. Moreover, if you are faint of heart and you like your books in pristine condition, then seeing my copies might be painful. They have been reread countless times, they have been lent, they have been passed around, they have circulated amongst my friends, and it shows. Alright, let's get to it. Actually, before the first proper editions of Andrzej Sapkowski's work in a book form, there was this collection of short stories that had previously been published in Fantastica. They were The Road of No Return, The Question of Price, The Grain of Truth, Lesser Evil, and The Witcher. The very poorly published and edited book was called simply Wiedźmin or The Witcher, and it was released in 1990. And as you can see, it boasted an absolutely hideous cover that Andrzej Sapkowski hated. I'm not sure if you know, but Mr. Sapkowski was never a fan of heroic fantasy or characters like Conan, and here we had a Conan-like hero on the cover. Moreover, Mr. Sapkowski stated many times that he detested Robert E. Howard's style of writing, which made me a little bit disappointed because, I have always been a fan of Robert E. Howard and Conan and Bran McMorn and Solomon Kane and characters like that. Still, as I've said, this edition was published in 1990, and at that time Andrzej Sapkowski started to conceptualize the saga. But before the saga, we got two absolutely stunning collections of the short stories that I will show you now. If you look online for some information about the first editions of the short stories, it usually says that The Last Wish, Ostatnie Życzenie, this one, was first released in 1993, and that Miecz Przeznaczenia, Sword of Destiny, this one, followed suit the same year. That's not true. My copy of Sword of Destiny is in a very poor condition, reread countless times, but still I will show you. It says here 1992, so the first edition of the short stories collection, Sword of Destiny, was published in 1992. And The Last Wish, Ostatnie Życzenie, in slightly better shape, was published in 1993, 1 year later. The Sword of Destiny contained 6 short stories, 2 previously published in Fantastica, which were Bound of Reason and Shard of Ice, and 4 new, The Eternal Flame, A Little Bit of Sacrifice, The Sword of Destiny, and something more. Miecz Przeznaczenia, or The Sword of Destiny, had a pretty cool cover with the sword and the Witcher medallion here, and it was also the only of the first editions that had any illustrations in it, all done by Bogusław Polk that I told you about in the previous video, and I will tell you definitely more in the video about the graphic novels. And here you can see some illustrations for the short stories. Unfortunately, in the next books, both in The Last Wish or Saga, there were no illustrations whatsoever. It's a pity because I think Bogusław Polk did pretty good job here. The Last Wish, or Ostatnie Życzenie, also featured Bogusław Polk's art on its cover, and it consisted of 7 short stories, 4 that had been previously published in Fantastica, and 3 new, with one overarching story that binded everything together. The stories from Fantastica were The Witcher, Lesser Evil, Question of Price, and The Grain of Truth. The 3 new stories were The Edge of the World, The Last Wish, and the overarching The Voice of Reason. Absolutely amazing stuff. All in all, if you want to read something by Mr. Sapkowski, I strongly suggest you read these 2, The Last Wish and The Sword of Destiny. In my opinion, the short stories are the pinnacle of his writing. He is like a master magician here, weaving a very potent spell out of words completely enthralling the reader. And this spell is very powerful, very focused, very concentrated, and it gets somehow diluted in the saga. Don't get me wrong, I love the saga, I think it's absolutely masterfully written, but still I prefer the short stories. But let's get to the saga. The Witcher saga started in 1994 with the release of The Blood of the Elves, or Krew Elfów in Polish, and here is the first edition, again with Bogusław Polk's art on the cover. But before that, before the release of this novel, avid Witcher fans, myself included, were treated with a sample of it by means of the short story or chapter taken from this book called Roses of Sherwood. And I told you about it in my previous video. This chapter had been first released, published in Fantastica in 1994, in March 1994, if I remember correctly. And we knew that the saga was coming because it said here, Tom pierwszy sagi o Wiedźminie, the first tome of the Witcher saga. It was the time before internet, so all the information we could get was from the magazines or from some conventions that Andrzej Sapkowski attended, or by word of mouth, actually. And I remember exactly that at the time there was this very vocal group of fans that were pretty annoyed that Andrzej Sapkowski was writing a saga instead of new short stories. I also prefer the short stories, but at the same time I thought that Blood of the Elves, the Krew Elfów, was bloody marvelous, and I couldn't wait for the next tome. Fortunately for us, Andrzej Sapkowski was a very disciplined author and published his books annually, and so in 1995 we got Czas Pogardy, or Time of Contempt, and it says here, Tom drugi sagi o Wiedźminie, which means the second tome of the Witcher saga. The third tome of the saga, Chrzest Ognia in Polish, or The Baptism of Fire in English, was written in 1996, and again it had Bogusław Polk's illustration on the cover, Milva here. If you know the saga, you know this character. And inside you also had some information that the next tome would be called The Tower of the Swallow, and it would be released the very next year in 1997. The fourth tome, Wieża Jaskółki in Polish, or The Tower of the Swallow, was indeed released in 1987, again with Bogusław Polk's illustration and indication that this indeed is the fourth tome of the Witcher saga, and inside we had some information that the next tome, the final one, would be called The Lady of the Lake. And then we had to wait for 2 years for the conclusion of the saga. Pani Jeziora, or Lady of the Lake, was released in 1999, and as you can probably guess, it's not Bogusław Polk's art, it's done by Krzysztof Drozd. And as far as the saga is concerned, as the ending is concerned, I was extremely disappointed that this was the end and couldn't wait for more. But it took some time indeed to read more stories about The Witcher. And for the next Witcher story by Andrzej Sapkowski, we had to wait for 14 years till 2013. In the meantime, we had a Polish TV show called The Hexa, which was bad. We had a Polish RPG system, which was pretty decent. We had two great computer games, The Witcher 1 and Witcher 2, Assassin of Kings. We also had graphic novels that I will tell you about in the next video. And Andrzej Sapkowski was working on something totally different. He was writing his Silesian trilogy, historic fantasy set in 15th century Poland, Silesia, Czechia and Germany, or Holy Roman Empire. And there were 3 tomes. The first one called Narrenturm, then the second called Boży Bojownicy, or God's Warriors, and the last one called Lux Perpetua. If you like historic fantasy, great books, I highly recommend them, but, we are waiting for The Witcher. And in 2013, a new book appeared. The Seasons of Storms, or Sezon Burz in Polish, was released in 2013. And it was a total surprise. Nobody expected it, especially because Mr. Sapkowski said many times that he had no intentions of coming back to the Witcher world. But eventually he decided that people do love Geralt and they want some more stories about him, and so Seasons of Storms appeared, And this is the prequel to The Last Wish. It takes place before the events of The Last Wish and, of course, before the events of the saga. Some people don't like it. I love it because, you know, it's more Witcher by Andrzej Sapkowski. But there is one very interesting thing that happened, I think 3 years ago or 2 years ago, connected to the Seasons of Storms. In 2015, this graphic novel was released. It's called Dzieci Lisice in Polish, or in English, Fox Children. And I think there is a mistake in the English version because it should be rather Vixen Children, because Lisica in Polish is a female fox, which is vixen. But that's not the problem. The problem is that this graphic novel is a blatant rip-off of chapter 14 and 15 of the Season of Storms. And Andrzej Sapkowski's name is nowhere to be found here. There is no indication that this is his story. There is no information that the graphic novel is based on the Seasons of Storms. I don't know why. Maybe there was some kind of agreement, but probably I think that Andrzej Sapkowski doesn't even know that this happened. If you know something about this, I would be very grateful for any information on this. The Season of Storms was the last Witcher story that Andrzej Sapkowski wrote, but I do hope that he is working on some more stuff. In the meantime, if you are desperate, there is this collection of short stories called Szpony i Kły, Fangs and Claws in English, and this is a collection of short stories curated by Andrzej Sapkowski. Actually, these are some fanfics sent for the short story competition in Nowa Fantastyka, stories connected to the Witcher world. And most of them are pretty average. Only the Fangs and Claws one, Szpony i Kły, in my opinion, is pretty good. So if it's ever released in English, I would suggest to start with that one. Alright, that's all for today. I hope you liked it. If so, please give it a thumbs up, please comment, and maybe consider subscribing to my channel. In the next video, I will tell you something more about the graphic novels. And until then, take care and have a great time. Bye.